Guys, Digging Deep Discussions, a show where we talk with local artists, leaders, and professionals about the topics impacting our culture and community. Today we're talking to Jessa Rae Growing Thunder, and she's a third generation beater and quillwork artist. Come back in a minute and see us. Hey everybody out there in Facebook world. Happy Wednesday. This is our Wednesday Digging Deep Discussion show. And if you're new to it, it's a new program where we are interviewing people from the community, either in the jewelry world or professionals or thought leaders. And Jessa checks off a few of those boxes. So this is Jessa Rae Growing Thunder. I'm going to read you her bio. She's a traditional bead worker and quill worker who has shown her work in the traveling exhibitions Hearts of Our People, Native Women Artists, Identity by Design, Tradition, Change and Celebration in Native Women's Dresses, and Grand Procession, a collection of contemporary Native American soft sculpture. In 2012 and 13, Jessa Rae served as Miss Indian World, in which she served as cultural ambassador, and she's worked as the State Department Liaison twice, once on a tour to Ecuador in 2014, and a second time in 2018 on a tour of Saudi Arabia. Jessa Rae is a PhD candidate in Native American Studies at University of California, Davis, and her research is rooted in the practice of history as an indigenous tradition of Dakota and Nakota peoples by applying both recognized and traditional creative forms of knowledge transmission through analyzing beadwork as living testimony to Fort Peck history. She is Nakoda, Dakota, and she's from Fort Peck Reservation in Montana.
Hamatakiapi, Abetuwashte, Shakina Dizahamia Imakiapi, Chante Washte Yuha Chuajapi. Good day to all my relations out there. My name is Jessa Rae Growing Thunder. I am Sisituwan, Wahpetuwan, Dakota, and Wadobana, Tuwa, Nakoda. I'm really excited to be here with my soul sister. Thank you all for having me.
Yes, of course. So I also want to wish you a happy belated Mother's Day for the world to know. Jessa had her baby 5 months before me. So we, during quarantine, we were like...
We were pandemic mamas.
Yeah, we were pandemic mamas for sure. We spent countless hours locked in our rooms with our feet up texting each other, I'm sure. So...
Pictures of the swollen feet and all.
Yes, some big feet. And I remember you telling me sometimes too that when you weren't, because I think we both had wicked morning sickness, and that when you weren't, and this is advice that I've taken into my own creative life, when you weren't feeling well, you didn't bead or work.
No. So I'm really blessed because I'm a 3-generational beadwork and quillwork artist, but really I am much further back than that. I want to say I'm 7th generation.
Sure.
You know, my grandmothers learned from her grandmothers, who learned from her grandmothers. And a lot of our beadwork traditions and protocols and everything, I've been really fortunate that I've grown up with. You know, and a big part of that are simple things like, you know, we're taught at a very young age that when we begin to pick up our needle and thread, that what we're doing here is we're creating life. Mm-hmm. And a lot of our traditions and oral histories, they talk about these things, that when women were given the gift to create art, and it began with quillwork, you know, mm-hmm. before colonization. Our really indigenous art form of my people is quillwork.
Can you explain to some of our viewers?
Yeah, so quillwork is actually, and I mean it's completely indigenous because everything about it was immersed in our natural environment and our land. So it's actually the process of taking porcupine quills, dyeing them with natural dyes that we find on the earth, and then stitching them down. On this piece right here, you'll see some examples of the quillwork. The white dragonfly, that's porcupine quillwork. And then this green that we see on it is actually sweetgrass that I've applied quillwork techniques to. And so that was our traditional art form, and that was how the gift to create art was given to our women. And then throughout colonization, you know, we were given, you know, new materials, new techniques, and we were introduced to seed beads. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that was something that we were given through trade routes. And so a lot of our traditions and our protocols that we gained through quillwork transferred over to beadwork. And so a lot of these things are, you know, I was raised, you don't ever pick up in your needle and your thread if you don't feel good. Like if you are having a hard time, if there's something, you know, bothering you, something weighing heavy on you, if you're kind of angry, frustrated, or if you're sad, or if you just don't feel good. Because what you're doing, and this is what our histories speak of, is you're creating life. You know, that's why women were chosen to do this, is because women have the ability to create life. That's how we were created on this earth. And art is another form of us doing that. And so every time we lay down our stitches, you know, we're giving life to something. And these things become living. And so when you know, you're not 100%, you're not in a good place,
that reminds me of cooking too.
Yeah.
I actually just spoke to this woman. She's Korean and she makes kimchi. And she tells me the same thing. She goes, if someone comes into the kitchen to help me and they're having a bad day, I send them home. She's like, I don't need that going into the kimchi. And I'm like, I know somebody who does that same thing. So I've actually started trying to honor that. Like, honor the days when I don't feel good, you know, because my work isn't going to be good either. So that's, I think, I just saw this article on how rest is decolonization, like learning to just rest.
Totally.
It's definitely something I struggle with because I'm a workaholic maniac. So it's like, oh yes, I need to just remember to like regroup.
Right? Because like we have to care for ourselves before we can do anything else.
Exactly.
Yeah, I totally 100% agree. And that's something I definitely feel within my work.
Yes, totally. And I just want to peek up here and look at who's watching. If you all have questions for Jessa, please pop them into the comments there and we will do our best to get them answered. She is a wealth of knowledge. Oh, someone's going to go see your work at Herd. Wait.
Oh, they got to see it last week.
Oh, cool.
Well, in Phoenix at the Herd Museum. Yeah, so one of the exhibits that is up at the Herd Museum right now is the Grand Procession show, and it's based on, I'm 3 generations, so there's me, my mom, my grandma, Jamie Akuma, and Rhonda Holy Bear, and they're soft sculpture dolls. And so it's really this remarkable kind of genre of beadwork and quillwork traditions because, you know, right, our young girls have always had baby dolls.
Oh yes, of course.
Right? And and that's an indigenous thing as well, to have baby dolls. And you know, that kind of genre has like transformed into these like fine art pieces where they're more like sculptures. And so there's a show up at the Herd Museum right now with some of our work. I love them. They're like, you know, they're really remarkable to do because they're actually just smaller versions of how we would be dressing ourselves.
I think I saw you shared a picture, maybe it was your grandmother's doll, and that was just, I mean, it's one thing to see all of that work go into a full-scale, like, adult-size outfit, but to see it's, you know, difficult in its own right because you have to scale everything down. It's incredible.
And that's why I love it, because I've been, you know, I started out collaborating with my mom and my grandma on them because it was a learning process for me. Like, they were able to show me in miniature version, you know, this is how you put together a war shirt. This is how you put together, you know, a chakpa, you know, and like all these different like varying parts of our regalia. And so I learned how to do miniatures so that I know how to do the life size.
Oh, interesting. I never thought of it as a learning tool like that, but you're absolutely right. Wow. Cool. Yes. So gosh, there's so many things I want to talk to you about. First of all, I want to let everybody know that this, the jewelry that I'm wearing and that's on display here, Jessa's going to be back here on Saturday as our guest artist, and these will be for sale then. So we're just we're teasing you with a little sneak peek.
Some teases.
Teases. Yes. And actually, can you talk about some of these designs?
Absolutely. So you know, growing up as a 3-generational artist, and, you know, just being blessed to growing up with, you know, a family of quillworkers and beadworkers, I mean, when I say this, like, I mean this, like, and you hear me, I say this whenever I get the opportunity because I know how blessed I am that my mom and my grandma, they wake up every single day at about, like, 3.
This is one of the first things you told me.
Yeah.
And I think about it all the time because it's incredible.
And so they wake up at about 3 in the morning, they bead and they quill all day long. And then they have dinner probably about 4 or 5, and then, like, spend a little bit of time together, and then they go to sleep by 7. They don't take days off, they don't vacation. Even like when they travel with suitcases full of beads.
I love that.
I have pictures. I have receipts. And so I remember being about 6 years old, and I understood, you know, I went to my friend's house, and I understood that my friend was non-native and that I was native. Mm-hmm. But for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why her mom wasn't beading. I just could not figure it out. And so I went home, and I asked my mom, you know, because I was confused, you know, why wasn't she beading? And so she explained to me that we have to do these things every single day. You know, whether we pick up our needle and thread, whether we sing, whether we dance, whether we pray, these little things help guarantee that our culture and these teachings are there for the next generation. So this is a responsibility. And so that's how I like to live my life. You know, I try to do these little things every day to guarantee that my daughter has them and that her children will have them, and her grandchildren. And so, you know, I've been very fortunate to grow up in this way, and a root of what it means for me to be a beader, and the generational knowledge that has been passed down to me is that we're beading stories, really. You know, we're inspired by our lives, we're inspired by our spaces, our environments, our families, our friends, you know, all of these things inspire us, and they find their ways into our beadwork. And so, you know, that's everything on this table. Like, I have a story too.
And I'm a storyteller, so obviously I geek out on this really hard. Because, well, I mean, you can find stories in everything, and I think that that's what's so incredible about being a human. We tell stories in every imaginable way, and so when you told me about, you know, what your project is, what is it, a thesis? Dissertation. Yeah. I knew it was not the right word. When you told me what your dissertation was, I just, like, I think about it all the time because it's just an incredible way of tying, like, some of my favorite loves. So please tell the people what you're doing.
So I'm actually finishing on my doctorate right now, and I'm first generation in graduate school. Like, I will be the first doctor growing thunder, but I will not be the last. I will not be the last.
Is your family so proud?
Yeah, my grandma is so excited. I'm grandma's girl right here.
I know that I just asked you to talk about your dissertation, but I also wanted to ask, I mean, at what point were you like, I'm going to become a PhD?
So, like, I finished my undergrad, right? I went to Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado. I had a ball there, go Skyhawks. And right after, I mean, I started toying with the idea of, like, going for my master's while I was a senior. And then right after I graduated, I was like, I sat there for probably about a month, and I was like, I have to go back to school. So I entered grad school with, like, I'm going to get my master's, it's going to be this great thing. And then probably about a year in, I was really fortunate. I had a few people that I was with at school, and they were, like, telling me, you need to get your doctorate. And no one had ever told me that before. No one had ever said, you know, you could do this.
Yeah, I've never even thought of it as a possibility for myself until I started meeting people like you and Mylon, and I'm like, you guys are my age and you're getting your doctorates. Like, that's amazing.
And it's like, you know, well, somebody's got to do it. Like, and the more of us that do it, the easier it's going to be for others.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Absolutely. That's why I pursued it. Is I'm the oldest of 24 grandkids, and if I can go down and break down some barriers so that it's a little bit easier for them,
sure,
then heck yeah, I'm going to do it. So that's kind of how I ended up
awesome.
Here.
Yeah. Okay. Now you can answer my original. I won't interrupt again.
And so I actually so my dissertation kind of really is rooted in who I am as a beadworker and a quillworker, and I actually started as an oral historian with my grandmother. You know, we have indigenous cultures. We have a long history of not enough people sitting down with indigenous women and documenting their histories. And so that's where my work started. And as I began, like, interviewing my grandmother and letting her tell what history she wanted to tell, I started to recognize, like, well, that story she just told me, that's in her beadwork. Like, I know exactly where that's at. And the more often it happened, the more I started to realize, like, this is exactly what I've always known, and this is exactly what I'm taught. But how come we never, like, look at these things in the same way? How come we never look at these testimonies and their beadwork side by side to prove, like, this is already happening? This entire time that nobody's been sitting down recording these women's, like, oral testimony, they've been in the background the whole time beading.
They didn't need anybody. They had it under control. They didn't need anybody to
like
them.
our women had it under control the whole time. Like, because, I mean, you can look at any piece of beadwork and quillwork throughout history, and there's a story to be told there. Like, we might not always know what it is, but I mean, the materials used, the colors used, the designs used, like, all of it was intentional. And, you know, that's this beautiful thing happening, and it's almost silent, it's almost voiceless, but at the same time, it's not.
Yeah.
And so
it's almost like you feel it. You don't speak it, you feel it.
Exactly. Totally. Oh, I love that, because you feel it. Like, this is heart work.
Yeah.
And so my dissertation is, you know, looking at my grandmother as an example of this, you know, somebody who's been beading and quilling her entire life, and recognizing that, you know, here's her oral testimony, but here's where I'm proving she has always kept this history. You know, she has always been doing this, always beading histories. Yeah. And so I'm proving that, you know, it's time that we start recognizing and asserting that there's these creative alternative histories out there that need to be recognized.
And I'm sure that's, I mean, I bet you're probably focused on beadwork, but it's pottery.
Yeah.
I mean,
weaving.
Weaving, it's everything. Yeah, wow. I mean, give them an example. If you don't mind talking about the vest, I think that's a good example of how you
definitely. So
tell a story with beads.
So absolutely, everything on this table, and it proves what I'm saying. And this is a nice, clear example that I like to show. This is actually my husband's vest.
Lift it up, maybe.
Oh, he should be watching too. Hi, babe.
Hi,
Nando. So my husband is a veteran. He is a Marine. He did 2 tours of Iraq, 2 tours of Afghanistan. I'm very, very proud of my Marine, and I adore him very much. And so this is a vest that I actually beaded for him, and it actually talks about his journey of being a veteran. And so everything on it was incredibly intentional about his history and his return home to us and to his family. And so right there, what we're zoomed in on, those are actually stars. I have 4 stars on each side. Those 4 stars talk about his 4 tours, 2 in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan. Down below we have this teepee design right here. And so this teepee, number 1, we have the American flags on it. And so the flags, you see a lot, they're very, very common in northern beadwork. And it has a long history. There's varying reasons for having flags. The purpose here is to acknowledge that he is a warrior for the U.S. And that patriotism is very, very deep into him. And so again, repeating that number 4 for him of, you know, returning home with 4 tours, and extending them off of his home, right? A teepee is supposed to be symbolic of the home and the family. And so this design talks about him being home, returning home with those 4 tours, and that honor. You see these kind of like, I'm trying to like look at the screen point at the same time.
I know it's hard to, it's like everything's backwards.
There's these kind of like white, subtle, they almost look like lightning coming off of them. And it's this subtle thing, and it kind of, I wanted it subtle because he's so humble. But it's supposed to symbolize honor, right? And so as he returns home and he very proudly wears his patriotism, right? He has this power that he's bringing home. And then there's you know, to talk about his travels, I have horseshoes on here. I also have on the very bottom, this is actually to represent a Sundance arbor, because that's something that has helped my husband return home. And so every single thing on it is intentional, and it tells a story of his journey and the honor that he carries and that he brings home with him. Moving over here.
I have a question really fast, and I don't hope it's not an ignorant question, but how many of the designs do you come up with on your own, the symbolism, and how many are like passed down as a language? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I would say like everything, like even when I come up with like a design that like I like is mine, like I see it, like that comes from somewhere still.
Yeah.
So like it's still like something that's passed down. I just do something to kind of change it to make it mine.
That
so
makes
like
sense.
yeah, so like the teepee, right? Like, you know, this is a very, like, of course this is a generational design. But like I opened up this bottom right here. I don't know if you can see that.
Other way. Yeah, it's opposite.
It's backwards a bit.
And so you'll see kind of like this bottom is like opened a little bit. There's nothing closing the teepee. So that was something that I had actually had a dream about. And I had never seen that. I'm sure it's been done before. That's the thing is, you know, as a generational artist, like you never know, like you can never really claim anything as your own.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I'm sure that's been
Even
done.
with me in photography, I'm like, oh, that's been done. Okay, well. Thought I was unique. It's okay. Okay, I understand though. Yeah, I mean, I think pottery design and weaving, it's all kind of similar. Like everyone puts their own touch to it.
Yeah, it's like, like we're constantly inspired.
And I was wondering, like, in terms of where the question came from, in terms of reading the beadwork like a language almost. If you are able to go back and look at an older piece and translate the story behind it because you understand the designs.
Yeah. Most designs most designs have a history, right? And if you are raised with these traditions, like you are fortunate because you'll kind of understand those histories, and you'll, even if there's like small changes to it,
you still recognize.
Yeah, you're still able to recognize it and be like, I know exactly where that's from. I know the story of that. I know why it's there.
Yeah. I regret, my grandma was a weaver. She did 2 Gray Hills weaving, and I regret that I didn't know to ask her those questions until now when she's passed. I didn't know to ask her what the designs meant. I have aunties that I can ask, and I will. Because now I know. Sometimes you just don't know the questions to ask.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Don't ever be scared to ask. You know, everybody ask questions. Yeah. And I mean, that's the beauty of it is like, you're an artist. Like, you know, like, it's amazing when somebody steps forward and they're like, you know, well, can you tell me about that?
Yeah. I know people are insecure about doing that. I have more questions about that later, but I'm going to let you finish.
So moving on over here, this is actually a woman's dance bag that I've done. Where's the camera? Where are we going? That way? That way?
Just a little bit
there we go! I'm going to figure out these cameras. So these are actually all done with these smaller beads, so 15s, 16s. So they're a little bit smaller than what we see on the vest. And so we have several things going on with this bag. This bag is actually really special to me because as Anji was mentioning, you know, I recently had a baby, and I actually started this piece when I was pregnant, and it was a really special time in my life because, you know, I've always paid attention to our oral stories that talk about women connecting with the earth. And, you know, we have that connection with the earth because we can create life and give life. And so when I was pregnant, like, I felt that. You know, I was able to connect with those stories and those knowledges in a very different way. And so this piece actually it talks about that. It's my own journey of kind of connecting with Mother Earth in a different way because I was carrying a life inside of me. So of course we have the flowers, and in my culture, when you see floral works done like this, it's a symbol of life because, you know, we were on the northern plains. We were nomadic, and if you saw these big, beautiful prairie flowers, it meant there was water nearby. That meant there was life, and so we could sustain there for a while. And so that's typically why you see the floral work, and the same goes for the dragonfly. So the floral work, you know, these bright colors, those are beadwork actually. And then the white dragonfly up here, that's porcupine quillwork. And then the green, that's the sweetgrass. And so it was a process of actually like taking a part of a plant, you know, a part of the earth, and incorporating it into the story I was trying to tell.
Had you used sweetgrass in that way before?
No, I had seen my mom do it, but it was the first time I had done it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you mess up a lot, or did you just get it?
No, you know, I was so amazed at how like it went so smoothly, and it created this really kind of like great depth to it because like some of it is darker, some of it is lighter, and it was just the way that like the grass was and the way it dried.
Yeah.
Because when I work with it, it was wet, And so it was just the way everything dried.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And then these applique stars on the side and the little sneaky one inside there.
Yeah. So the stars I actually added later. Like, you know, it was one of those things where I thought I finished it and I kept staring at it and I kept saying, like, there's something missing.
Is that you and Nuna?
Yeah. It's actually, it talks about, you know, I put them on there because, you know, the stars are always guiding us. You know, the stars let the earth and the plants and the animals, like, the stars help let everybody know the seasons and, you know, when that new life is coming. And so I added the stars on there to incorporate that story. And so this was really like a way for me to kind of like capture that moment in my life and in my story that, you know, I understand these things in a different way now. And so everything on it is completely intentional. It's a lot of fun. I like this piece.
It blows me away. I actually got inspired to try and teach myself to bead while I was pregnant. And I got halfway through a design that I tried to invent on my own, and I'm telling you, this is not an easy thing to do at all.
And it's like, the thing about it is like, it's very meditative.
It was, like, I didn't even care that it looked terrible. I was just like, I had such a good time, because you're just present, like, but your mind wanders, and you're just doing something with your hands. And we're so, like, techie all the time that just doing something with your hands felt amazing.
And, you know, like, I aspire to be like my grandma. Like, you would get a trip out of my grandma, because my grandma, she does this every day, and so it's almost like a muscle. And so sometimes when I watch her, if I do a project, like, I have to, like, think about it. I have to, like, oftentimes I dream. Like, you know, it takes a lot of time for me to even, like, get to the point where I'm ready to start. You know, I gotta do a lot of planning. But my grandma, she will lay something in front of her, and she'll have maybe a few guidelines, and then she will just go.
This is such a grandma thing. That's my grandma too. She freaking taught herself how to weave.
Oh, wow.
Incredible, like, blue ribbon award-winning rug she taught herself. Because she had seen, when she was 8 years old, before going to boarding school, she saw them do it. One time when she was 8.
Oh, I love it. I love, like, the resiliency of our women where they're just like, I could do that.
I know, I ask people all the time, well, did somebody teach you how to do that, or was it Dene determination? And it's always Dene determination. Like,
oh, that should be a shirt.
It should. I think, hey, that's mine. I call that one.
Oh, I love that.
So, speaking of the dragonflies in the water, you had a sweet story about your dragonfly designs that I wanted to make sure and talk about.
Yeah,
so these, okay, sorry. Carol had asked if you're going to have dolls on Saturday. The answer is no.
No.
She's going to have jewelry. These are some sneak peeks of what she's going to be bringing. These aren't for sale today. You have to come back on Saturday for them. At 3:30 p.m. As far as the dolls, I don't know. I don't know if you take orders or what that's like, but we won't have them.
The dolls are like a very, very long process. Currently, like, I couldn't even tell you how many projects I have going at the same time.
I'm sure. So, sorry, Carol, no dolls.
At Santa Fe Indian Market this year, hopefully we'll have some of those larger pieces, if you all want to stop by.
Yeah. Oh, I needed to ask you that. Shoot, there's so many questions. Do you know your booth number?
Not off the top of my head, but on Saturday I can bring that.
Okay, so when you guys come back on Saturday, Jessa will also tell you her Santa Fe Indian Market booth number. She was my neighbor at Indian Market. That's how we met. She was, oh my god, her and her sister were so fabulous. And then they, like, literally, like threw down a blanket and just had this makeshift changing room. And my mom is sitting there and she's like, I love how Native women just make themselves at home everywhere. As she's making herself at home. I was, well, I need to be her friend. But
now we're soul sisters
that's
all
right.
these years later. So dragonflies. So I actually started making these wonderful little dancing dragonflies. Want the camera here? Boop, boop, boop. Look at, I am getting the hang of this.
I love that they're 2 colors.
Yeah, so these ones actually have a really nice kind of like, it's almost like a pinky pearly red, as well as a rich ruby red. And an abalone drop. And so I started making, I call these my dancing dragonflies. And I started making them actually last year in the heat of the pandemic, where, you know, you're cooped up at home. I think I was like 6 months in at this time. And you know, with the pandemic last year, like, we weren't able to, like, go home. We weren't able to, like, go to ceremonies and you know, see family and be with everybody.
Your mom didn't get to meet Nuna until she was a year old.
Yeah.
It was heartbreaking.
Yeah. And so, last, you know, in the heat of all this, like, I found myself really missing all of my family in South Dakota. Nando and I travel to South Dakota every summer to go be with our family for ceremonies. And this really amazing thing happens, you know, it never fails every time I'm out there with my family and, you know, we're in ceremony, where these dragonflies come in and they dance. You know, they dance to the drum. And, you know, I've been told that, you know, there's the males dance differently than the females. And, you know, some of them, they really kind of are really showy when they dance. You know, they flutter around, they show off their moves. And some of them kind of like hover. And so I found myself really missing South Dakota, missing my family, missing ceremony and everything. And so I started thinking about those dancing dragonflies. And so this was my take on my dancing dragonflies. And it was just, you know, it just, I love wearing them. I'm wearing some right now. These were my very first pair I did. And it just was you know, I feel like I've talked to so many people who, you know, they know exactly what I'm talking about. They know those dragonflies. Yeah. And, you know, those dragonflies, you know, they're that symbol of life. You know, they're that symbol of hope. And, you know, they bring grace and humility with them.
Well, and then somebody explained the difference between the male dance and the female dance?
The males and the females are the ones that dance different. And so the males are the ones that are kind of like really showy and everything. And then the females are the ones that kind of hover.
Well, the vibration.
Yeah,
it's cool. You know, bees have a dance. They communicate through dance.
Really?
Yeah, they have like several they have a language in dance.
Really?
Yeah, it's really cool. It's a whole other. I'm a total bee geek. I love bees. They're my favorite thing ever.
I love it. And so, yeah, so that's it. And so like the stars I have here too as well. Like that was just me kind of really just missing my family in South Dakota. And thinking about that time during ceremony, you know, during the summer when we're in ceremony, we have to get up, you know, before the sun comes up. You know, we have to make sure that we're awake and, you know, we're ready to start the day by the time our grandpa rises. And so, you know, right before he rises, we see that big morning star in the sky.
Yeah.
And so I made these ones with the intention of, you know, talking about the morning star. And so they, you know, the morning stars, you know, they really kind of flutter and everything. And so I love it when you wear these.
Oh, they dangle.
They,
I know
like,
you
they
keep looking at my ears because I'm wearing like a cat.
And so they dangle, right? And so like it's almost like, you know, the morning star when it really like really shimmers in the sky.
I love that time of day.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love them. And then of course,
oh yes, these ones.
Angie has on
here, I'll take one off so you can just, so Chef doesn't have to chase me around with the camera. And I'll answer some questions up here. Christina, we're obsessed with beadwork too. Come back, Christina, at 3:30 on Saturday, and these are going to be for sale then.
So these are just a teaser of some of the different styles that I'll have on Saturday. This style, so these are inspired by Dakota floral beadwork. So our Dakota florals are something that you'll see more out of our Eastern relatives. In our Dakota history, we all came from the East, you know, those Eastern homelands, you know, that's where we all emerged from. That's where we all have a home, and many of us were actually exiled and removed and placed on the Northern Plains, and that's how my people ended up in Montana. But I love Dakota florals because it's not something I do very often. It's something that I like to do because it kind of like regrounds me and, you know, kind of puts me in check that, you know, it's not just me and me being in Fort Peck, but rather like we have these relations still across these boundaries and these territories. And so it's not something I do very often. Dakota floral are like really bright colors. You know, it's almost, a lot of times you see like primary colors with like, you know, these really great hints of pinks. You see like a lot of stars, but these like really vivid colors, right? And it's like when you get on the Northern Plains where you have more like geometrics and like heavy blues, like contrasting with like the Dakota floral stuff. Where it's
interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
They had more access to like the seed beads because they were closer to the trade routes.
Oh.
And so like those bright colors that the traders had, like they were able to get a hold of first.
Okay.
So they're really creative. But then you also have to consider too, like they were inspired by their natural environment. All the beautiful like medicines and plants that are in our eastern homelands.
Sure.
That's what these florals are. So I have a lot of respect for them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That leads me to a question that I had. That I've been dying to pick your brain about a little bit. So, fashion. Christian Allaire is writing for Vogue magazine. He's Ojibwe, and he's bringing indigenous fashion designers into Vogue, as you know. And I think he did a story on your mama. Yeah. And so all of a sudden it's kind of trendy, like native fashion is trending, but with every indigenous culture in the world, the clothing has always been, it's always been fabulous. It's always been fashion, but it's just been what, we've done. And it tells a story. And I wonder, like, if you have any just things that you think about, or when it comes to, like, when does something go from just being traditional clothing to, like, fashion, to, like, Vogue? Because I feel like that's a conversation that's starting to happen now that people are, like, thinking about. And I don't think that we really know the answer yet, but we're, like, figuring it out.
I think, like, we're definitely in that phase where we're trying to, like, figure it out. And I think, like, that's the beauty of, like, jewelry. I think jewelry is what makes us, like, able to kind of, like, go back and forth, right? Because jewelry we can be traditional with it. Like, we can wear it with, like, our full regalias, but we can also wear it with our everyday clothes and be fashionable.
That's true.
Right? So I think jewelry is, like, our most accessible mode for that right now. I don't know about, like, that fine line. Like, I'm inspired by it all. Like,
because then, of course, the appropriation issue becomes an issue.
Yeah.
So, like, when does it start being fashion that's accessible to everybody and not assimilate, or appropriation? Like, it's such a kind of a confusing.
It is. It's a really confusing thing because then too, like, you have to consider stuff like, like with beadwork where, there's histories and there's stories and, like, all of that is knowledge that needs to be carried on. And so, like, I'm sure that, like, all cultures, like, come across this, when they get misappropriated, where, those stories and those knowledges aren't being transferred into the fashion aspect of it. And so it becomes like the slippery slope.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know. I don't have
I don't have an answer either. It's just something I think about a lot. And what I think is so cool, though, is that these native fashion designers they're not just creating, like, trendy fashion pieces. Like, everything has a meaning. Whether it's, like, a political meaning or it's connecting back to place, which is what I think the clothing always has done.
Yeah.
It's just being reimagined in a more contemporary way, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting. It's an interesting thing.
It's really interesting because, like, right, so it makes me think about, like, the ribbon skirts, right? Ribbon skirts, there's a lot of history behind ribbon skirts and where they come from. Like, so my people in Fort Peck, I don't want to be like one of those Indians where I'm like, it came from my people. But, like, on the Northern Plains, that's where they came from. Is that's where we saw ribbon skirts come from. And it came from that early reservation period where, we were being rationed fabrics and ribbons. And so that's when our women started to make these beautiful ribbon dresses. But there were stories and there's histories behind it. There was an intention behind it. There's teachings that go with that ribbon skirt. And it has entered, like, the fashion realm, and that's great. Like, I love it. Like, I love being able to see, like, all these women, like, dress to the T and, like, kind of just, like, really create and hold space.
Yeah.
In these very, like, colonial spaces even, right?
Yeah.
Like Deb Holland,
Well, but I think that the difference there too is that they understand, they respect the history of it, and they're not wearing it because it's cool. Like, it's cool, but it's cool in, like, a way that has a whole lot more substance than just, like, it's cool because it was in, a fashion magazine or something, or, like, a celebrity wore it.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying is, like, yeah. So I don't know, like there's like so many.
There's a lot to unpack there, and I don't expect you to have the answers or just to unpack it in this show by any means, but it is something that because I know Sar was doing a whole series on talking about fashion, and I got to hear some of it, and it's interesting because because it's such a new conversation, everybody has a different perspective on it and a different idea about it, and that's what's really fun is because you get to hear there's not like a set way of thinking about it yet. It's very fluid.
Yeah.
It's a very exciting time.
So my mom actually was selected to be a fellow at SAR for
that's a
next
school
spring.
of advanced research in Santa Fe.
Yeah. And they have really, really amazing programs. And so she was chosen to be a fellow for next year. And so her project is actually going to be doing 2 Assiniboine dress styles. So
awesome.
she's trying to revive like 2 specific, well, not necessarily revive it. It's not like it's vanished or anything, but she was just trying to draw attention to like these specific dress styles that are often like misrepresented.
And I think that's what's really awesome too about having designers in spaces like Vogue is because they are getting to explain the story of this fashion. It's not being explained for them. You know, they're having agency over the design, so hopefully people outside of the communities, even though they're Native people, are able to learn more about where these designs come from. Because when you look at other countries, they have their native dress, right?
Yeah.
Like everywhere has like, this is how we dress if we're from this area. In the United States, it's like, it's everywhere, and like, you have to be careful about dressing one way because that belongs to somebody else. And I think the more we start learning about each other and the way each other dress, then we can have more respect for everybody's different clothing traditions, and maybe I don't know, and then who knows where it could go from there, you know?
I think it's like I think like we're in this really, really great like pivotal moment with it because like we are intertribal. Like we have always been intertribal. It's not like we've ever been like
sure, of course,
you know. And so like, you know, being in this modern world right now where like, especially with the pandemic and everything, and being so like active with social media and like finding these new avenues to like connect with each other across boundaries and territories, I think like, you know, this is exactly like, you know, what we're going to see happen, like come out of all this.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that is something really extraordinary about social media. And actually, speaking of beaders, like all of these beadwork artists took over Instagram and like created a whole market for beadwork on Instagram.
It's crazy.
Like,
so
it's amazing.
Awesome. Yeah. No,
there's a lot of negative stuff that comes out of social media, and then there's like some really amazing things, like phenomenons like that. So,
yeah.
Let's see. There's all sorts of comments up there. See if we have any questions.
A lot of thank you for your husband's services.
Yes.
Excited to see you on Saturday.
Carol Red Horse Taylor, Joyce is the greatest of all time. Do you know?
Oh, Cole. Yeah.
Cole. Did I say Carol? I'm sorry, Cole.
Cole is a fantastic artist. He is out of Minnesota. He is an Eastern relative.
Cool.
So he does traditional beadwork, quillwork. He does phenomenal ledger work. I believe he is doing Indie Market virtually this year. But make sure you check out his work.
Awesome. I love having new people on here checking us out.
Oh, look at, there he is. He's like,
yeah.
hi. Hi, Cole, my ride or die.
I love it. Oh, man. I feel like I'm just forgetting to ask you questions that I had. This is why I should have brought my little note cards. But then I didn't even use them last time I brought the note cards because I get all on my tangents and stuff. Does anybody have any questions for Jessa?
How do you take care of and or clean beadwork items? This is a really great question. So, I mean, beadwork is just something that like you have to be really careful with it. It's not necessarily something like you can like throw it in a washing machine or anything like that. Oftentimes, like, you know, it's just a matter of really caring for your work. You know, like, you know, my husband's vest, like I wrap it in like an extra piece of fabric to make sure like it's, nothing is like, it's not gonna get dirty from just, you know, dust, and, you know, nothing is gonna accidentally you spill on it or anything. And, you know, the same with jewelry, like, you know, you should see how I travel with my jewelry and care for my jewelry. And so beadwork isn't something that you can easily clean, but it's just a matter of like, you know, caring for it. there are ways you can actually clean it. Cosmetic sponges are actually really, really great to clean beadwork, and I picked that up working in museums.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is something that museums and conservationists actually use to help care for beadwork, is they take makeup sponges, and it's just like lightly, going over the beadwork. You're able to pick up so much dirt that way. So if you ever need to clean your beadwork, that's what I recommend. That's something safe. You don't ever really want to put like chemicals or anything on it, because the seed beads are glass. You don't know how the glass and the beads will react.
Don't store things in your bathroom. I learned this the hard way.
Oh yeah.
I destroyed a pair of beautiful Lakota quill earrings. I just didn't think.
No.
And the humidity,
yeah,
it just like basically disintegrated. I was mortified.
So like the thing with quillwork is, quillwork is like, it's almost really sturdy in the sense that like it's very firm. Like some quillwork, like you can pick it up and you're just like, wow, that is durable. Like you look at historic pieces and you're like, that has held up for generations.
Yeah. Well, porcupine quills are no joke.
Yeah.
I don't even know I don't understand the process at all. Like how you take it from here to there.
But at the same time, like there's something really delicate. Like they don't respond well to humidity.
Nope.
Like you don't ever want to get quillwork wet, especially if it's like a wrap quillwork, meaning that
that's what these were.
Yeah, which means like it's not stitched down with any thread at any point, but rather it's wrapped around rawhide.
Mm-hmm.
So the minute it gets wet or it gets humidity, it just unravels.
Yeah. That was awful. I was sad about
And
it.
the thing about it is like why it feels almost so sturdy but it's delicate, is because the little barbs on the quills, they actually like grip onto each other.
Whoa.
And that so it gives itself, like it holds itself together.
Interesting.
It's just that moisture, really.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Carol wants to know if you have a website. She does not.
I am
We're
like,
gonna have a conversation about that after the
you
show.
might need to help
shall
me
we?
with a website.
I do not have a website.
I know, I'm like the last person in the world who doesn't have a website. I'm like so bad with technology. I have an Instagram handle, Jessa Rae GT. My family has a Facebook page, J Growing Thunder. I am so bad with technology though, like I am so sorry.
Let's see. Cole wants to know, what is your standpoint on min beaters?
Since it is traditionally a women's-led art form. This is a really great question, Cole. It's really because you're one of my faves. So, I mean, we have, even before colonization, when we just had quillwork, I mean, we've always had histories and stories that talk about men being chosen to practice this women's art. And in those old stories, it was, the men would be chosen and they were given the choice. Do you want to do this and carry on the responsibilities that come with it, or do you not want it? Because it is a lot of responsibility. So I mean, we've always had, historically, there's been men that have picked these things up. But I think where we start to see more and more men pick it up is, and I talk a little bit about this in my dissertation, is that right after World War II, and we're in this height of conformity. And all of these assimilation tactics are happening against indigenous people, like relocation, where we're literally sending natives, going to the res, putting them on a bus and sending them to the city, and being told, like, now you're going to be a good American. And so it was this height of conformity. And when we had all this happen where, we were basically being told, we shouldn't be natives anymore, that we need to be Americans. Which, why can't we be both? And so that's when we start to see a lot of, like, especially quillwork, there starts to be like almost, it didn't completely vanish, but a lot of it, wasn't done during this period because, we were being told not to do it.
So where are you going to get porcupine quills in the middle of
wherever,
Seattle,
like a lot of it
or
was
LA
access.
or
A lot of it is access. But then we are also, so like a lot is happening right in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s where, we're kind of like losing, a lot of quill workers and quillwork traditions and practices and everything. And then we're also experiencing this like height of like urban spaces too. all at the same time,
Mhm.
right? Where we're getting more urbans in the city, or more urbans in the city, more natives in the cities, and so they're having like intertribal powwows and everything, and so more people are in need of like regalia, so they can go to these social events, and so like I think it just really becomes a matter of like there wasn't enough women beading during all this time, so more men began to pick it up, and that's great. Like that's great. And so that's where we start to see more and more men become beaders and quilt workers because of this need, right, to keep things alive. Because even quilt work, like I remember being a kid and there was hardly any quilt workers. You know, I have like memories of like grandmas crying to me because, you know, they were worried nobody would quilt anymore. They were worried it would be lost. But now we have, you know, this kind of like revival happening,
it's
right?
a renaissance.
and it's this really remarkable thing. And so, I mean, I appreciate the men out there who bead and who do quilt work, who also recognize like the traditions of it and recognize it as a woman's art form. But I think like there's a fine line there. Like, you know, my hope and my dream is that these men that carry on these things and contribute to them, that they respect women, that they share with women, and that they acknowledge these traditions and these histories in a good way, because that's our responsibility. You know, that we're all responsible for that. You know, doesn't matter your gender, we're all responsible for that.
Yeah. When you said it's a responsibility, how do you mean? Just in terms of the act of creating or the act of storytelling?
All of it, because I believe that it all goes hand in hand. Like I believe that you know, when you're a bead worker, you're a storyteller, and that you have a responsibility to not only tell your story and to have intention with everything you create, but you have a responsibility to know those histories and to know those designs that you're putting in. And it's your responsibility that if another bead worker approaches you, you know, sit down with them, talk to them, share knowledge with them, you know, help one another. You know, we all have that responsibility. Like that goes with any of our cultures and our traditions, that, you know, we all have these responsibilities that we have to uphold. So.
That seems like that's a big difference, I think, between like Western fine art and indigenous fine art. Is the willingness to, or not the willingness, but the responsibility to share. And to share the spaces with other art, like help lift up other artists. Not to say that like other fine artists don't do that, but I think like there's a difference in a lot of artists. I think that like outside of the Native community, like you're the weirdo in the family because you're an artist. You know, like it wasn't something that you were like raised to become, because the art forms are not necessarily art. It's more like this is an expression of us as a living human people. And I think that's an interesting difference when it comes to like what is art, you know.
Totally, because like if in indigenous cultures, like if you're an artist, like you're a knowledge keeper. Like, you know, because these things aren't just art. I mean, we all have different names for them in our own languages of what these things are. But like art is a colonial word. That's a Western word.
Yes.
And so like really when it comes down to it, like if you had the knowledge to bead or quilt or to make baskets, to weave, to do pottery, like you were a knowledge keeper. There were certain knowledges that you held that others in your community possibly didn't have. And that's to be respected.
Absolutely. I know, like for me, words are my storytelling, and photos as well, but I always just pray that I can just be a voice. Like, just put me where I need to be to tell the stories that need to be told. They're not my stories. I'm just the person that writes them or takes the pictures of them. They're not mine. And I love that. I love being the medium for storytelling.
I love that selflessness and that humility about you.
Me?
I love that. Like, I adore you.
I literally tell other people's stories. If I said they're my own, it would just be ridiculous.
Because I think that's, you know, that speaks to the core of who we are as Indigenous women, right? Is like, you know, it's not ever about us. It's about the betterment of all of us.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, let's see what kind of questions we have up there. Christina's excited. Christina, I'm going to see you on Saturday. What'd you say? This Reemergence of Beadwork?
Oh, absolutely, Christina. I would say that this, like, you know, this
Let's read the question out loud.
Okay.
Christina says, would you say this reemergence of beading and quillwork is part of a greater awareness of the, quote, we're still here, and, quote, something else movements?
Absolutely. Completely. Because, right, like there's different parts of it too. Like it's, you know, for the people creating. I mean, and it's not just right here, right now, with the amazing use of like social media and technology of, you know, like something else. But it's, you know, going back to, you know, like the 60s and the 70s as well, of like, you know, being able to put on your beaded vest, or to be able to like dress up and go downtown into the plaza and dance.
Mm-hmm.
Like those were all things to assert us in these like Western spaces that otherwise at this point, you know, were against us.
Yeah.
And so we're all about, I mean, we're so voiceless in so many ways. And I think the remarkable thing about our people is like we, no matter how many times and the circumstances to make us voiceless, we're always making sure to assert ourselves and to hold space and to keep space.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, for the creators of this work, you know, for the beaders and the quillworkers themselves, I mean, it's, they're able to use this as like, you know, the we're still here because, you know, the federal government tried to get rid of these traditions.
What I love about that, and what I think is the case as well, is that we're not, we're still here. It's more like for us. Like it's not, we're not putting this on for other people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's it's like walking into your living room and making yourself at home everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, because we're still here. We've always been here. This is home.
Mm-hmm.
We're putting our clothes on because this is what we do. This is who we are, and it's not about anybody else.
Yeah.
We're just owning the space because we literally own the space.
Yeah. Like that.
It's not like we're making a political statement or like anything like that. Like it's literally like this is
who
just
I am.
who we are.
This is who I am, and
Mm-hmm.
this is the culture I come from, and these are the knowledges that I carry, and I'm gonna do whatever I can to support it,
Mm-hmm.
to uphold that responsibility.
Right. Yeah.
I love that. This is my little sister Dylan.
Hi, Dylan.
You are amazing.
She says, any advice to those natives who are contemplating a PhD slash, what is that? ED? What does that stand for?
It's like a doctorate for education. But I'm not really sure. I'm still waiting on you to get it. I'm still waiting to hear that you want to apply for somewhere. So my advice for anybody like contemplating going for a higher education is just do it. I mean, like I tell people, you know, it's just a few years of your life. It's something that, I mean, so much good can come out of it.
What has come out of it for you?
So many doors have opened. I mean, and it's a matter of like not just doors that have opened for me individually, but doors that have opened, like, you know, I think about, you know, the work that I'm doing, and when I'm able to give presentations on my work or talk with other people in other institutions or in communities and tell them like, you know, I'm proving that beadwork has always been a way for Native women to keep history and to
Mm-hmm.
write history. And when I tell them that, they're, you know, you can see these like little
Light
clicks.
bulbs, yeah.
And they're like, you know, what? And so that's just not a moment for me. That's a moment for all of us that,
Yeah.
you know, like, you know, that person that had that light bulb moment is going to hold on to that, and they're going to go and they're going to change something. They're going to change the way they talk about our women. They're going to change the way they talk about Native art. They're going to make things more accessible, and they're going to ask more questions. And so, I mean, doors have opened for all of us. And it's not an easy task, but anything worth having isn't going to be easy. You have to work hard for it. So, I mean, if anybody out there is contemplating it, especially if you're a young Native person, like, just do it. Like, it's worth it. It's an uphill battle, but heck, I'll be there for you. Like, I will be your cheerleader. I will be the one helping you get through it. I'll help you with the scholarships. Like, you reach out to me, I will be the one to help you.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to get you a website first.
Just
start there.
Okay,
bringing it back to the beads. What do you string them on?
It's actually thread. So traditionally it would be sinew, and sinew comes from the buffalo. You know, when we're buffalo people, we come from the Tatanko Oyate, and so the sinew was a part. It's like a natural thread, and it's not something that is done a whole lot anymore. But I have a dream project of revitalizing that, and doing courses on sinew. And so now we use like a nylon thread. Sometimes it's silk thread. Wire is like sometimes you'll see it if you see beaders like working with like diamonds and other material where it's going to cut the thread. But for the most part, thread. And it'll depend. Like you'll have varying like materials and everything. I try to use like the best materials I could possibly can. Like all of my jewelry is done on buckskin, with the smaller size beads. 13s, 15s. I work with 24 karat gold beads, silver, sterling silver beads. All
Are these gold?
Those
Holy
are 24.
smokes.
Yeah, those are 24 karat gold.
Oh, wow.
Sterling silver beads, and then all the findings, of course. Shells, everything like that. Like I always try to make sure to use the best materials I can find. Yeah, just because especially with my jewelry, right? I'm always like, I always make things so that I know I would wear them.
Yeah, well, of course. If you're a jeweler making jewelry that you wouldn't wear, there's something terribly wrong. Well, I think that brings us to an hour. If anyone has any last minute questions, please pop them in there. Otherwise, we're going to see you at 3:30 on Saturday. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention while we have you here? The captive audience?
This has been really fun. Thank you all for like all of your great questions and your feedback.
Yeah.
This has been really great. I hope you guys come back on Saturday. Please come. Like these are just a few samples, teasers of some of the work and that I'll have on Saturday.
Do you use brain tanned hide?
Yes, I do.
All right.
Do you ever have any interactions with like the leather, the buckskin, with the sterling silver, like tarnishing or anything like that?
I haven't. I've seen it in other works, but I've just like I try to keep the sterling away from the buckskin so it's not rubbing on the buckskin.
Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
Mhm.
We had that problem here a little bit.
All right. Thank you, Jessa.
Thank you.
For sharing your knowledge with us. You're such a blessing. Thank you, everybody.